Hello, I'm Liz Hill. Welcome to Podsnappery, the willful determination to ignore the objectionable or inconvenient, at the same time assuming airs of superior virtue and noble resignation. We explore things I find interesting, unusual, or annoying. So let's get down to it and spill the tea. October is upon us. The days grow shorter, and as the darkness expands and the light is extinguished, soon the veil will thin on Samhain, what you call Halloween. Now, we're not talking about Halloween origins. We did that back in episode 19. Feel free to review that. No, go ahead. I can wait. Time's up. Oh, good. You're back. I knew you would be. Now, where were we? Oh, yes, our topic. This time we're dishing about witches.
I'm going to worm all of your ugly secrets out of you. Tell me now, who undoes your hair?
Witches have a long and elaborate history. Their forerunners actually appeared in the Bible, in the story of King Saul consulting the so-called Witch of Endor. No, not that Endor. They also popped up in the classical era in the form of winged harpies and screech owl-like strixes, frightening flying creatures that fed on the flesh of babies.
I ate a baby! Oh, aye, baby! The other white meat! Baby! It's what's for dinner!
Circe, the enchantress from Greek mythology, was a sort of witch, able to transform her enemies into swine. Why does this sound familiar?
You're all pigs!
Oh, right. Bavmorda. Nice work. And since blame is better to give than receive, many point the finger at the ancient world. I mean, why not? They're all dead anyway, right? And as such, they are left holding the bag, being responsible for establishing a number of tropes that later centuries would come to associate with witches. A lot of these old world aspects were continued in modern tales. You know them and love them. Those classic cliches we've all seen on film and TV again and again. Behold, the gallery of witches. Now, in patriarchal societies, sadly including our own, post-reproductive women have often been scapegoated as threats and burdens. But many scholars now believe that these women's presence is not only a defining characteristic of the human species, but the very thing that enabled us to flourish. Shocker. Scientists know of only 5 species in which females outlive their reproductive stage. Humans are special in this regard, along with killer whales, where older females ensure the species' survival by guiding their pods to food sources, and sometimes taking out their frustrations on rich people's yachts. See, they got the right idea. Until the last few decades, many researchers assumed that in humans, this trait was a useless quirk or the unintended result of some other adaptation. Turns out that this phenomenon is a happily adaptive feature, not a bug. In her deeply researched book, The Slow Moon Climbs, The Science, History, and Meaning of Menopause, historian Susan Mattern presents strong evidence that menopause likely evolved in our Paleolithic past, as a part of a flexible reproductive strategy that bestowed our ancestors with crucial advantages. It helped them both thrive in good conditions, when older women were able to forage and help care for children, and make it through tough times when resources were scarce and less reproduction was beneficial. You know, this makes a lot of sense to me.
Logical. flawlessly logical.
Unfortunately, in Puritan New England, this was not the case. Consider Bridget Bishop, who was the first accused person to be hanged as a witch during the infamous Salem witch trials. Bishop's age was likely a factor in her tragic fate. Historian Brian P. Levack reports that the majority of people accused during the witch-hunting spasms of early modern Europe, roughly the 15th century to the late 18th century, were women over 50. Those of middle age are thought to have been the most common victims.
She's the witch.
Yeah, that's right.
She's the witch.
I was just about to accuse her.
This is crazy. I'm not a witch.
Then how come your laundry is always much whiter than mine?
Oh, I've heard enough. Burn her!
Such women, historian Stephen Katz observes, especially those who never had children, were considered the female group most difficult to assimilate into the male-dominated social matrix. They may appear to exist outside the boundaries of society, using their knowledge and power to alter or escape the normal laws of the universe. They are unnatural. Unnatural? Really? Or are they?
It's just a bunch of hocus pocus.
Mattern explains that from humanity's earliest stages, women beyond childbearing years were not only energetic food gatherers and essential caregivers, but also custodians of knowledge who passed along vital technological skills. We may have been formerly taught that the male Stone Age hunter was the hero of human success, but some researchers now speculate that it was actually the less celebrated development of cooking that cast the die in our favor, a job typically performed by women, who may have been the first to domesticate plants.
Feed me. Does it have to be human? Feed me. Does it have to be mine? Feed me.
Thankfully, not those plants. In agricultural societies, middle-aged women became the bedrock of peasant economies, essential to food processing, textile production, healthcare, medicine, and a wide range of farm work. They frequently ran farms when male relatives died, went to war, or left as wage laborers, a pattern still true today. But agrarian cultures also tend to intensify patriarchal patterns that subordinate women. In these societies, men typically control all or most of property and then pass it on preferentially to boys, investing less in girls who traditionally married and left the family. In most cases, women were unable to inherit land and forced into dependence on male relatives, with the possible exception of the few women like Mary Catherine Goddard. If that name doesn't ring a bell, go back and look at episode 32, Childless Cat Lady. Some destitute older women may have been targeted as witches because poverty made them economic burdens. Yet when they managed to secure their independence, they were punished for that too.
We have found the witch. May we burn her? Burn her! Burn her!
Other women challenged patriarchal structures because they were nonconformists or healers whose knowledge was held in suspicion during bad times, like the Little Ice Age between 1300 and 1850 that coincided with the height of the witch-hunting fever. Women, especially older ones, are still branded as witches today when communities are under threat or sense challenges to traditional power arrangements. More about that later.
Spoilers!
Historically, witch hysteria really took hold in Europe during the mid-1400s, when many accused witches confessed, often under extreme torture, to a variety of wicked behaviors. Within a century, witch hunts were common, and most of the accused were executed by burning at the stake or hanging. Single women, widows, and women on the margins of society were especially targeted. Between 1500 and 1660, up to 80,000 suspected witches were put to death in Europe. Around 80% of them were women thought to be in cahoots with the devil and filled with lust. Germany had the highest witchcraft execution rate, while Ireland had the lowest.
German efficiency.
The publication of Malleus Maleficarum, written by two well-respected German Dominicans in 1486, likely spurred witch mania to go viral. The book, usually translated as The Hammer of Witches, was essentially a guide on how to identify, hunt, and interrogate witches. Malleus Maleficarum labeled witchcraft as heresy and quickly became the authority for Protestants and Catholics trying to flesh out witches living among them. For more than 100 years, the book sold more copies than any other book in Europe, except the Bible. As witch hysteria decreased in Europe, it grew in the New World, which was reeling from wars between the French and British, a smallpox epidemic, and the ongoing fear of attacks from neighboring indigenous tribes. The tense atmosphere was ripe for finding scapegoats. Probably the best-known witch trials took place in, say it with me, Salem, Massachusetts in 1692. Right. Once again, we see that those accused of witchcraft were mostly women and almost always outsiders. Basically, the usual suspects. This is especially true of the Salem witch trials. The first to be accused was Tituba, an enslaved woman of color and indigenous descent. It is all too easy to scapegoat people of color and marginal members of society. Sarah Good, who was arrested along with Tituba, was a beggar who was looked down on by the town for her financial instability and her debts. Sarah Osborne lived on Salem's margins too. She was involved in a dispute with her children over their dead father's estate and was reviled for an affair with an indentured servant. All three women were perfect targets for accusations of deviant, even evil, behavior. Flash forward 332 years and not much has changed, has it? On June 10th, Bridget Bishop became the first accused witch to be put to death during the Salem witch trials, when she was hanged at the Salem gallows. Ultimately, around 150 people were accused and 18 were put to death. Women weren't the only victims of the Salem witch trials. 6 men were also convicted and executed.
You will say it, Corey! Speak, man! We cannot relent! What say you, Corey?
Ma. Wait!
This happened all over the world, even today. In India, they are persecuted for witchcraft as an excuse to seize their lands and goods. Older women in Nigeria are also accused of dark magic and blamed for natural disasters and other calamities. Many are maimed and killed. In the West, starting in the early 18th century, as modern medicine began to develop, doctors, usually male, began to construe menopause as a medical condition characterized by hysteria, murderous derangement, and nymphomania. Dangerous symptoms to be treated with grotesque remedies such as toxic douches or the abstinence of sex and love. In the 1960s, physician Robert Wilson, backed by drug manufacturers, wrote a bestseller called Feminine Forever, describing menopause as a disease and a living decay that must be treated so that women could retain their youth and sex appeal. Even though Wilson has been discredited, the notion that women must undergo plastic surgery or expensive medical procedures to stay young keeps its hold on our psyche. Some experts are now calling for menopause to be demedicalized, viewed as a natural process in a healthy woman's life in which only severe or debilitating symptoms should be treated, much the way we would now think of menarche. That was a bit of malarkey. Now, despite what you have heard, Massachusetts wasn't the first of the 13 colonies to obsess about witches. In Windsor, Connecticut, in 1647, Alice Young was the first person in America executed for witchcraft. Before Connecticut's final witch trial took place in 1697, 46 people were accused of witchcraft in that state, and 11 were put to death for the crime. 33 years later, a satirical article, supposedly written by Benjamin Franklin, about a witch trial in New Jersey, was published in 1730 in the Pennsylvania Gazette. It brought to light the ridiculousness of some witchcraft accusations. It wasn't long before witch mania died down in the New World, and laws were passed to help protect people from being wrongly accused and convicted. In the United States, women no longer meet the fate of Bridget Bishop. But powerful older women who lead and speak out, like former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, are still routinely taunted as witches. In Australia, Julia Gillard, the first female prime minister, was abused with the slogan, "Ditch the witch." While in Britain, one member of Parliament's Christmas card depicted former Prime Minister Theresa May as the Wicked Witch of Westminster. So it is no surprise that the maggot movement is doing the same thing to Vice President Kamala Harris.
She can look presidential, and we'll go to this later. That's the seduction of what I would say is witchcraft. That's the manipulation of imagery that creates an impression contrary to the truth, but it seduces you into seeing it.
So I feel the need to explain a little. That ass, I mean man, was Pastor Lance Wallnau, an evangelical preacher and televangelist based in Dallas, Texas. This is the guy who married a woman named Annabelle and has been referred to as the father of American dominionism. A self-described Christian nationalist, he is known for popularizing the concept of Donald Trump as a modern-day biblical King Cyrus from the book of Isaiah. That being said, hey, Lance. Can I call you Lance? I don't care. Why don't you just admit that you are attracted to Kamala? There's no need to blame witchcraft, unless insecure little people like you want to just go play with your dollies. Weirdo.
What?
So, the willful determination to ignore the objectionable or inconvenient, at the same time assuming airs of superior virtue and noble resignation. That, my friends, is Podsnappery. Thanks for watching. I'm Liz Hill. It is odd we are taught to fear witches, not the people who burn them alive.